Hello and welcome. I'm Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. Our big focus this hour: United States Vice President JD Vance is slated to arrive in India for his first visit to the country, along with his Indian origin wife Usha Vance and their 3 children. The family will be in India for 4 days. This trip comes amidst President Donald Trump's aggressive trade moves, including a 26% reciprocal tariff on Indian goods as part of broader tariff announcements affecting countries worldwide. The much anticipated discussion between JD Vance and Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to pave the way for deeper cooperation in various sectors, including defense, technology and trade, outlined across the 19 chapters. Meanwhile, India is sending a team of 5 to 6 negotiators led by India's Chief Negotiator Rajesh Agarwal to the US on the 23rd of April. The question that arises now is how important is this visit for India-US ties? Joining us live is Ambassador Suresh Goyal, former diplomat. We have Ross Feingold, political risk analyst, live with us as well from Taipei. Quinton Hitchcock, American political consultant, is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Pratik Joshi, South Asian affairs expert, is also joining the broadcast. Let me make a start with you first, Suresh Goyal, on how you view this visit by JD Vance. What all do you believe will be top of the agenda of the U.S. Vice President?
All right. Let us put it this way, that this is the first high-level visit from the USA to India since President Trump took over. There have been several visits, but essentially at a policy-making level, this is the first ever really since the new president came in during his second term. And therefore, the items on the agenda would be what have been occupying the minds of at least the Indian policymakers, if not the USA, but I can talk about India. And those are really number one, the trade, the tariffs, the way they have played out so far, and we have been talking about the bilateral trade agreement, but so far at least I personally, have not seen if President Trump has made any distinction between India and the other countries in terms of the tariff. For example, if the tariffs went up to 100%, they went up to 100% for India. When they came down to 10%, they came down to 10% for India, along with Vietnam and other countries. Even though in terms of the trade flows, when we talk about China +1, Vietnam is one country where the China companies working in China have been able to divert their operations for the USA market. And therefore, the comparisons between India and Vietnam as the exporters or the suppliers or as part of the supply chain are a bit odious in that sense. So therefore, I need to see whether during this visit there are any indications of the USA showing a kind of understanding for Indian concerns on the trade front. If that is reflected in the bilateral trade agreement, that's it really, there's nothing else. Number 2, there have been a lot of questioning on the immigration visas, the deportation of the Indian students and so on and so forth. Now, for example, in the recent cancellation of visas, the largest number has been that of Indians. Now, that may have been inadvertent. It happens all the time, but I think a bit of an explanation, clarification, understanding between the two governments would be necessary. Third, in terms of defense, technology. Now, technology is not simply an issue of really saying that we will supply the technology and you can use it. There's a whole lot which goes through in terms of operationalization of the technology. So far, I find that while USA has always assured India of the willingness, but it is not translated into any actual action. Not to say that India has delivered to the USA whatever they wanted, but I think we need to work out a better modality for transfer of technology from the USA to India. Those are the 3 things I would say for the time being, Uday. There are many more, but let us see how they pan out.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Let me get in. Yes, Ross Feingold in at this point. Ross Feingold, what do you believe is going to be, top of the mind of the United States Vice President and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when they do, of course, engage in that crucial bilateral meeting tomorrow, how important is this visit for furthering the India-US partnership?
It's certainly a very important meeting for the partnership, even though Prime Minister Modi was in Washington. He was one of the first foreign leaders that President Trump met after President Trump took office on January 20th. But the interesting thing to watch, in my opinion, is what issues will each side prioritize. It's clear that India's side wants to reach a trade deal to avoid high tariffs. I would expect Vice President Vance to raise China-related issues. I'd also expect him to try and be a salesman for U.S. products, and specifically with regard to weapons, which India has indicated they're interested in buying more U.S. weapons. So I think the top of the list for each side will be slightly different, but I would expect it to be a very harmonious meeting.
Yes, Quinton Hitchcock, let me quickly draw you in here on this visit, on this meeting. How important is it? Will it help, of course, our trade negotiations with the United States as well, as we hope to clinch a deal? Also, Quinton, the fact that JD Vance has an Indian origin wife, Usha Vance. How do you believe that perhaps also is going to help this partnership of the India-US under Vance and Trump?
It factors into it for sure. I mean, this is a vice president that can cook Indian food and loves the Indian culture. But I think more than anything, I think India knows what a tremendous economic opportunity they have, specifically with the continuing trade discussions that the US and China are having. Let's remember that right now, since 2021, the US has been India's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade value, depending on the year, upwards of about $100 billion, which sounds like a lot of money. But let's also look at the flip side of that. And India sometimes doesn't even crack the top 10 in the US's largest trading partners. Okay, so countries like Mexico and China are upwards of about $500 billion. Discussions have already begun with President Trump and Modi to increase the value of bilateral trade between the two countries. One very, very key aspect to pay attention to here, and this is a huge part, a huge component of President Trump's foreign policy, and that is our relationship to China. Now, most elected leaders in America, certainly the Trump White House, views China unequivocally as the largest adversary that the United States has. And the last thing that this Trump White House wants to do is have the largest economy in the world dependent on their biggest adversary. So that's going to pose a tremendous economic opportunity for India. And I think that's something that India will take advantage of during this meeting with JD Vance. I think they're going to discuss a lot of things. I think I agree they're going to try to come to a trade agreement to avoid tariffs, but I think India is very well aware of a much larger opportunity that they have with the United States in the coming years.
Okay, let me get in Pratik Joshi in as well at this point. Pratik, what do you believe are going to be those items on the agenda of this meeting between Modi and Vance? And Pratik, how, to what extent is this meeting going to impact the India-US partnership going ahead? We've already seen, of course, a key engagement between Vance and Modi in France. We also saw, of course, Trump and Modi meeting earlier this year in Washington, D.C. itself. Now with Vance's visit to India, where does the India-US partnership go?
So thank you so much for having me. So I'll say that behind all these developments, there's this confidence on part of the American policymakers that this partnership can help India position as an even more influential strategic player in Asia. And as you just mentioned, this all builds up from Prime Minister Modi's US visit in February. And the visit had some very powerful statements coming out. But they also place the onus on the Indian side to deliver. The first being Mr. Trump, President Trump mentioning about increasing military sales to India. I think that's one thing that we should look after, that what are the proposals that Mr. Vance brings, be it the F-35 fighter deal, Then there's this talk about reviewing of the transfer of military technologies to New Delhi. That's one thing, because there has been a complaint from the Indian side that that the Americans have been reluctant to transfer critical technologies. And obviously, if that translates into joint defense cooperation under Make in India, that's something we should see. Talking about the economic side of the things, obviously, $500 billion goal is a huge. It's an ambitious task both sides have given to themselves. So obviously, but the elephant in the room is the American complaint that the average tariffs on the Indian sides, they are like some 17% compared to 3.3% on the US side. I'm quoting a report. And obviously, this widens when it comes to fields like agriculture. So that's something, or dairy products. That's something which the Americans will press. On the Indian side, we have to talk about gems, jewelry, pharmaceuticals. That's one thing we should look. And finally, the energy sector, because the trade balance is another big issue. So India will probably, we will expect to be importing more oil and gas from the Americans to balance the trade imbalance. So that's how I see, the conversation panning out. Thank you.
Okay, let me in fact quickly ask you then about Ross Feingold, the importance of this strategic partnership. Now, you are based there in Taipei. You understand, of course, how important India is for the US, particularly in that region as well. What makes this partnership important for both sides? And strategically, which way can this partnership head under the Trump presidency?
Well, there are numerous reasons why this relationship is so important and is continuing to go, I would say, from strength to strength. I mean, certainly they have a common interest with regard to China's rise, and especially with China's extraordinary investment in its military capabilities. That's definitely a concern to the United States as well as India. Their fellow democracies is another thing that binds the two countries together. And frankly, American companies want to do business in India. They want to make money there. And India is a rapidly growing market with an extraordinarily capable workforce, a rising number of middle class and well-to-do consumers. So American companies want to be in India, and that's understandable as well. So there are a lot of things that bind these countries together, which again is why I would describe the relationship as going from strength to strength. But some of those key issues are security and economic related.
Yes, Quinton, quickly drawing you back in here as well on this India-US partnership, which way will it be headed under the Trump presidency, according to you? And what makes this partnership important in the very changed geopolitical world that we live in today?
I anticipate the relationship between the United States and India to strengthen under the Trump White House. It's a well-known fact that this White House has a very good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. So that is definitely a positive for both countries. They're both democracies, but I think, again, the biggest factor here is the United States is looking to become less dependent on the Chinese government. That cannot be stated more clearly. That is a national security concern, according to this White House and most of our elected government. So that is why India has such a tremendous opportunity with the United States. I think the United States has a tremendous opportunity to come to a bilateral trade deal with India that favors both countries and that allows both economies to prosper in the years to come. But both countries have a tremendous relationship, and I really only anticipate that strengthening over the next 3.5 years.
Okay, let me go back across to Ambassador Goyal at this point as well. Ambassador Goyal, the fact is that the Vice President will be accompanied by Usha Vance. Usha Vance is of Indian origin. She's of Hindu heritage. The children will also be with them on this visit. There'll be, it's a cultural visit as well of them exploring India, exploring Agra, exploring Jaipur. What kind of soft power does that also play? Her Indian descent into this partnership and the kind of cultural experience that they want for their children as well, and because of their children's, Indian heritage as well at this visit.
Uday, it's interesting that you should mention about the soft power component in the visit. Now, I have dealt with culture for a long, long time in my life. And I have always maintained that the cultural component can be a lubricant in terms of easing the communications, in terms of easing the understandings, facilitating how we talk to each other. But when it is hardcore interest, culture is not a substitute. In that area, you need to talk about your hardcore interest, basically strategic interest, defense, everything. You need to understand what each country wants. And therefore, now coming to the specifics here, we have talked a lot in terms of generalities. The specifics. Usha Vance is an Indian. Origin. She's not Indian. She is an American. She's married to the Vice President of the USA. And therefore, for her, the primary driving force will be the interest of her husband as the Vice President of the USA and the USA. Clearly, the cultural component is going to make a difference in terms of how she sees the various places. She goes back to her village, she meets people in the village, etc., who will adore her and everything. But that will have a limited value. Mark my words. Therefore, let us not really dwell on this thing that Usha Vance is an Indian, and therefore build up the whole edifice of what Usha Vance can do. Zilch. Okay? Cultivate her, good, but don't think that she can influence what Trump wants. No, she can't. Number one. Number two, India in the USA scheme of things. Again, we talk about in terms of how good India and the USA are for each other. You talk of specifics. I don't see any. You talk about geopolitical, the geoeconomic matrices, and the problem is that both Donald Trump and both our government, we tend to mix up the geopolitics with the geoeconomics. It doesn't work. If we think that because of economic competition with China, Donald Trump, as the president of the USA, is going to really show any favors to India, I think we are living in illusions to say it's a bad world then. Therefore, we need to build up our own strength as an economic and trading partner with the USA. If USA looks at India vis-a-vis China, USA can also give up on India if they strike a deal with China. We need to be aware of it. We are member of the Indo-Pacific because USA thinks India is a counterweight to China. What happens if the equation change? Therefore, Uday, what I'm saying here really is that we are discussing a lot of geostrategy on the TV shows, but there is a lot which goes on behind them. And we need to be very careful and we need to be aware that not everything can be said or unsaid or done when we are talking things in a discussion like this. Uday.
Yes. Let me draw you back in here, Prateek, on the aspect, of course, of AI, tech, emerging technologies.